You're standing in a funeral home. The air smells faintly of lilies and furniture polish. Someone hands you a pamphlet, burial or cremation, 2 boxes to check, a simple choice on paper. But inside you, something stirs, an ancient question your soul has been carrying for lifetimes. What really happens when fire touches flesh? Does the soul feel it? Does flame erase something sacred, or does it release it? This isn't about logistics. This isn't about cost or convenience or what your family prefers. This is about the most vulnerable transition you'll ever make. The moment when everything you've called you steps out of the only home it's ever known. And the question beneath the question is this: will you be conscious when it happens? Will you be intact? Will you be free? What Edgar Cayce revealed about cremation will change how you see death, how you see fire, how you see the journey waiting beyond your last breath. Because what he saw wasn't superstition. It wasn't religious dogma or cultural preference. It was a map of the invisible hours after death, a map of what the soul experiences when the body is returned to flame instead of earth, a map that respects both the mystery and the mechanics of dying. And if you're here listening to these words, it's because some part of you already knows. Death is not an ending, it's a threshold. And what happens at that threshold matters more than most of us have been told. So let's walk through that threshold together. Let's ask the questions everyone whispers but few dare to speak aloud. Let's find out what one of history's most documented mystics discovered about fire, soul, and the sacred art of letting go. Edgar Cayce never wanted to be famous. He wanted to be a photographer, a quiet man living in Kentucky, taking portraits of families and children living an ordinary life. But the universe had other plans. At 21, Cayce lost his voice. Doctors couldn't explain it. For months, he could barely whisper. Then, under hypnosis, something extraordinary happened. Cayce's unconscious mind diagnosed his own condition, a psychological paralysis affecting his vocal cords, and prescribed the cure. Within days, his voice returned. Word spread. People came to him with illnesses no doctor could solve. And Cayce discovered he could enter a self-induced trance, access information he had no conscious way of knowing, and deliver medical readings of stunning accuracy. Over 4 decades, he gave more than 14,000 documented readings. They're all preserved, archived, cross-referenced with medical records, historical events, and follow-up reports. Cayce became known as the Sleeping Prophet, but he wasn't predicting the future for entertainment. He was reading the Akashic Records, the universe's living library of every soul's journey. He was accessing what he called universal consciousness. And among those thousands of readings on health, karma, past lives, and spiritual growth, a quieter thread emerged. People asked him about death, about what comes after, about burial customs and cremation, and whether these things mattered to the soul. His answers were never simple, never a clean yes or no, because what Cayce saw was this: the soul doesn't vanish the moment the heart stops. It lingers, it reviews, it slowly disentangles from the etheric web, still binding it to flesh. And during that process, during those sacred invisible hours, what we do with the body matters, not because the body is the soul, but because the soul isn't entirely free yet. Cremation, Cayce said, could be a blessing or a disruption. The difference wasn't the fire itself. The difference was timing, intention, consciousness. In this chapter, we establish something crucial. Edgar Cayce's voice carries weight not because he claimed divine authority, but because his words were tested, verified, documented. He spoke from a place beyond the personal ego, from what mystics call the superconscious mind. And what he revealed about cremation wasn't about superstition, it was about anatomy, spiritual anatomy, the architecture of how a soul leaves a body, and why, if you understand that architecture, You can make death, your own or a loved one's, a sacred passage instead of a crisis. Cayce spoke of a window, a sacred pause between death and release, not 3 days as metaphor, not 3 days as religious tradition borrowed from Christianity or ancient Egypt. 3 days as cosmic fact. When the heart stops, the soul doesn't vanish. It doesn't instantly shoot up a tunnel of light and arrive in heaven. That can happen. Cayce affirmed it does happen for some, but it's not automatic. It's not the rule. For most people, the soul hovers. It reviews. It watches the body from a slight distance, still connected by invisible threads of energy that take time to dissolve. Cayce called this the etheric withdrawal. The soul is separating from the etheric body, the luminous double made of life force and memory that has animated the physical form since birth. This process is gradual, gentle. It's meant to be 72 hours. That's the window. That's how long it takes on average for the silver cord to fully dissolve and the soul to complete its initial life review. And here's what Cayce saw clairvoyantly. During those 72 hours, the soul is still sensitive to what happens to the body, not in the way flesh feels pain, the nerves are dead, but in the way consciousness registers presence, disruption, shock. Cremation too soon, Cayce warned, is like waking someone mid-dream, jarring, disorienting, sometimes painful, not physically but energetically. The soul feels the flames not as burning, but as sudden, overwhelming presence. Heat, light, rapid dissolution. Imagine you're in deep meditation. Your awareness has expanded beyond your body. You're floating, reviewing your life, saying silent goodbyes. And then, without warning, someone yanks you back into intense sensation. Fire, roaring, etheric threads snapping faster than they're ready to release. That's what premature cremation can feel like for a soul still tethered to its etheric shell. But cremation after 3 days? After the silver cord has dissolved, after the soul has completed its review and risen into the borderland between worlds. That's different. That's liberation. The body is just an empty vessel by then. The soul has already left, and fire becomes what it was always meant to be, a purifier, a transformer, a final blessing that returns the elements to their source. The question isn't whether cremation is wrong. The question is, when does the soul truly leave? When is the body no longer inhabited, even subtly, by the consciousness that once lived there? Cayce gave us the answer. 3 days. Wait 3 days. Honor the threshold. Let the soul do its work undisturbed. And then, only then, let the fire come. You are not just flesh and spirit. Between them lies something shimmering, something most people never see, but every mystic tradition has mapped. The etheric body, the energy double, the luminous blueprint that holds your physical form in place, that carries your vitality, your subconscious patterns, your cellular memory. Cayce described it as woven light, a lattice of energy threads connecting every organ, every nerve, every chakra to the soul's intelligence. It's what makes healing possible. It's what acupuncturists work with when they insert needles along meridians. It's what mediums perceive when they see a ghost. And when you die, this etheric body doesn't collapse instantly. It frays, slowly, strand by strand. The process begins at the extremities. The hands and feet lose their etheric charge first, then the limbs, then the torso. The last points of connection are the heart, the solar plexus, and the crown of the head. These are the power centers, the places where soul and body have been most intimately entwined. And connecting them all, stretching from the heart chakra to the soul's next level of existence, is the silver cord. The final tether, you've heard of it. It appears in Ecclesiastes, before the silver cord is severed. It appears in near-death experience reports, where people describe a luminous thread connecting their floating awareness to their physical body below. It's not metaphor, it's structure. subtle structure invisible to physical eyes, but absolutely real on the energetic plane. The silver cord is what allows the soul to travel during deep sleep and return safely. It's what keeps you anchored during astral projection. And at death, it's the last thing to release. Until it dissolves, the soul is still reading the body's signals, still entangled, however faintly, in its frequencies, like a radio that's mostly tuned out, but still picking up static from the old station. Fire accelerates this dissolution dramatically. The intense heat doesn't burn the soul. The soul isn't made of matter, but it does burn through the etheric webbing, fast, violently from the soul's perspective if it's still attached. Earth, by contrast, slows the process. The body cools, decomposes gradually. The etheric threads unwind naturally, at their own pace, like rope left to fray in the wind. Neither method is evil, neither is wrong, but each creates a different experience for the departing consciousness. And here's what Cayce wanted us to understand. The soul needs time to disengage, not because it's clinging in fear, but because there's a process, a sacred, necessary process of untangling lifetimes of energetic habit, of reviewing every choice and encounter, of saying goodbye to the form it's worn. If you understand this, if you honor this, you can make death gentle, you can make it conscious, you can give the soul the gift of an easeful exit, and that changes everything. Fire has always been holy. Every tradition knows this. Hindus place their dead on funeral pyres and watch the flames carry the soul upward. Zoroastrians revere fire as the purest element, the closest thing to divine light. Celtic druids burned sacred wood to honor the dead and open portals between worlds. Indigenous shamans use smoke and flame to cleanse, to protect, to invoke. Why? What is it about fire that touches the soul? Cayce understood it. Fire isn't just heat. Fire is transmutation. It's the element that takes one form and transforms it completely, irreversibly. Wood becomes ash, flesh becomes vapor, solid matter becomes light and air. And on the spiritual plane, fire acts as an alchemical solvent. It burns away residue, energetic residue, the imprints left in the etheric body by years of habit, trauma, attachment, unprocessed emotion. You carry those imprints with you, lifetime to lifetime. They're stored in the etheric matrix. Cayce called them karmic patterns. Modern psychology might call them subconscious programming. Either way, they're sticky, they cling. They influence your next incarnation unless they're cleared. Fire clears them. When the etheric body is consumed by flame, after the soul has fully withdrawn, it acts like a spiritual detergent, burning away cellular memories, attachments to form, the subtle weight of regret, fear, and unfinished business that might otherwise follow the soul into the afterlife. This is why Cayce said, cremation, done rightly, can actually support the soul's freedom. It accelerates release. It cuts the cords cleanly. It says, I am finished with this form. I release all claim to it. I am spirit now, and only spirit. But, and this is crucial, the soul must be clear of the body first. Fully clear. If fire comes while the silver cord is still intact, while the soul is still processing and reviewing, then fire becomes chaos, not clarity. It becomes intrusion, not liberation. The element itself isn't good or bad. The timing is everything. In the ARE archives, there's a case study Cayce gave about a man who requested immediate cremation in his will. Within hours of his death, the body was burned. And during a reading months later, Cayce accessed the man's soul and reported what had happened. The man experienced confusion, a sense of being rushed through a doorway before he was ready. He recovered. Guides on the other side helped him, but the transition had been jarring, unnecessarily difficult. Another case, a woman who waited 5 days before cremation. Cayce reported her passage as smooth, luminous, and joyful. The fire came as a blessing, a final act of love that freed her completely. The difference? 3 days. Patience, honoring the invisible work the soul was doing. Fire is sacred, fire is powerful, and when used with wisdom, it becomes the ultimate act of spiritual hygiene, burning away the old so the soul can step fully into the new. Cayce was a compassionate man. He never condemned. He never spoke in absolutes. But when it came to premature cremation, he didn't soften the truth. If fire comes too soon, the soul feels it. Not as pain, the physical nerves are dead, but as shock, disorientation, a sudden tearing away from something it wasn't finished with yet. Think of it this way. You're in the middle of a profound meditation. You're reviewing your entire life, every joy, every mistake, every person you loved, every lesson you learned. You're untangling threads that have been knotted for decades. You're saying silent goodbyes. You're preparing to step into a new realm of existence. And then, without warning, the room catches fire, not literally, but energetically. The etheric body you're still partially inhabiting is suddenly consumed by intense heat and light. The threads connecting you to that form are snapped, not gently unwound. The silver cord is severed abruptly instead of dissolving naturally. Cayce described souls who, cremated within hours of clinical death, experienced what he called astral turbulence, confusion, a sense of being pulled in multiple directions, brief panic, a desperate attempt to reorient in a landscape that suddenly felt chaotic instead of peaceful. This isn't damnation. It's not eternal suffering. The soul doesn't go to hell because it was cremated too quickly. That's not how the universe works. But it is disorientation. It is an unnecessarily rough transition, like being thrown out of a moving car instead of stepping out gently when it's parked. And here's what matters. The soul recovers. Always. There are guides on the other side, angelic presences, evolved souls, loved ones who've passed before, who immediately step in to help. They provide what Cayce called spiritual anesthesia. They cushion the consciousness. They slow the perception of time. They guide the disoriented soul toward the light, toward peace, toward understanding. No one is abandoned. No one is lost. The universe is far more compassionate than our fears imagine. But Cayce asked a simple question. Why make it harder than it needs to be? Why rush? Why not give the soul the time it's biologically, energetically, spiritually designed to need? In one documented reading, a grieving daughter asked Cayce about her father, who had been cremated the same day he died, due to legal requirements in the country where he passed. She was haunted by guilt, by the fear that she'd harmed him. Cayce's response was gentle but clear. Yes, her father had experienced initial confusion, but he was fine now. He understood. He didn't blame her, and the lesson wasn't to carry guilt. It was to know better for the future, to teach others, to restore respect for the dying process. Death has a rhythm. Death has a sacred architecture, and when we interrupt it out of convenience, out of ignorance, out of societal pressure to deal with the body quickly, we create friction where there could be flow. The shadow side of cremation isn't the fire itself. It's the haste. It's the lack of awareness. It's treating death like a logistical problem instead of a spiritual threshold. And now that you know, you can choose differently. So what does honoring look like? How do you respect the 3-day threshold in a modern world that wants to rush, sanitize, and move on? Cayce's answer was simple. Wait. Let the body rest undisturbed for 72 hours. This isn't about embalming. It's not about refrigeration or formaldehyde or funeral home protocols. It's about presence. It's about creating sacred space for the soul to complete its work. In that time, those 3 days, the soul is conducting its life review. Frame by frame, it's witnessing every moment it lived. not in judgment, but in understanding. It's seeing the ripple effects of its choices. It's feeling for the first time what others felt when it acted. It's integrating the lessons of an entire incarnation, and it's saying goodbye to the body, to loved ones, to the world it knew. During this window, the soul is still present enough to perceive love. It can hear prayers. It can feel when family gathers. It can sense when someone speaks to it directly, offering forgiveness or gratitude, or simply saying, "I love you, I release you, go in peace." Cayce called this the vigil, and it's not a new invention, it's ancient. Almost every indigenous culture practices some form of it instinctively, sitting with the body, singing to it, telling stories, keeping candles lit, staying awake through the first night, then the second, then the third. Not because the body needs company, but because the soul does. In the ARE archives, there's a beautiful example. A family asked Cayce how to care for their dying mother. He told them, keep her comfortable, play her favorite music, speak words of love and release, and after she passes, do not move the body for 3 days. Let her complete her transition in the home she loved, surrounded by the people she cherished. They followed his guidance, they lit candles, they prayed, they sat in silence, and on the 3rd day, just before they called the crematorium, the daughter reported feeling a sudden, overwhelming sense of peace wash through the room, as if her mother had just said, "Thank you, I'm free now, you can let me go." That's what the vigil creates, not superstition, not obligation, but a container for grace. After 3 days, the silver cord severs naturally. The soul rises into what Cayce called the borderland, the realm between earth and higher dimensions where souls rest, review, and prepare for whatever comes next. And then, and only then, flame becomes blessing instead of intrusion. The body is empty. The fire is simply returning matter to energy, and the soul, watching from beyond, perceives it not as violence but as completion, as a final act of love. If you want to honor death, honor the vigil. Make space for those 3 days. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't require ritual training or special equipment. It requires only this: awareness, patience, and love. That's enough. That's always been enough. But life is messy. Reality doesn't always cooperate with ideals. Accidents happen, sudden deaths, legal requirements. Sometimes the state mandates quick cremation due to public health concerns or bureaucratic procedure. Sometimes there's no choice. And if you've been listening to this with a knot in your stomach, thinking of someone you loved who was cremated hours after they died, thinking you failed them, let me stop you right there. You didn't. Does rushing the cremation create a bumpier transition for the soul? Yes, Cayce was honest about that. But does it doom them? Does it trap them? Does it cause eternal harm? No, absolutely not. The soul is resilient, far more resilient than we give it credit for, and the universe, the compassionate intelligence that holds all souls, knows when death was sudden, knows when fire came too fast, knows when there was no time to wait. In those cases, Cayce said, guides and helpers on the other side provide immediate assistance. They cushion the consciousness. They create what he called spiritual anesthesia, a slowing of perception, a dimming of intensity, so the soul isn't overwhelmed by the rapid dissolution of its etheric shell. Think of it like this: you're being woken abruptly from deep sleep, but someone immediately wraps you in a soft blanket, dims the lights, and speaks soothingly until you're fully awake and oriented. The wake-up is still sudden, but it's cushioned, protected. Intention matters too. Energy follows attention. If cremation happens quickly, but is chosen with love, with respect, with awareness, if someone is standing there, mentally sending light to the deceased, saying, "You are safe, you are loved, go toward the light," that energy reaches the soul. It helps. It smooths the path. Cayce gave a reading once for a woman whose husband had died in a car crash and been cremated the same day due to regulations in the state where the accident occurred. She was devastated, convinced she'd sentenced him to suffering. His response was profound. He said, "Your husband's soul chose this path before birth. The sudden death was part of his curriculum. The quick cremation was part of the lesson, not for him, but for you, to teach you that love transcends form, that your prayers matter more than protocol, and that guilt serves no one." He then added something that brought her peace. "Your husband is not suffering. He was met immediately by those who love him in the higher realms. He is learning, growing, and he asks that you stop carrying this weight. It is not yours to bear." This chapter is for anyone haunted by past decisions, anyone who cremated too soon, anyone who didn't know, anyone who couldn't wait. You didn't harm your loved one. You didn't trap them. The universe is kinder, more flexible, more grace-filled than fear suggests. Your person is okay. They're more than okay. They're free. They're learning. They're evolving in ways that have nothing to do with what happened to their body. But moving forward, you now know. When time allows, when you have the choice, give the gift of the vigil. Give the gift of 3 days. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but out of love, out of honoring the sacred architecture of dying. And if you can't wait, if circumstances force your hand, then pray. Visualize light. Speak words of release. Trust that grace fills the gaps our limitations create, because it does. It always has. Let's pause here and say something clearly, something that might surprise you. Cayce never said burial was wrong. In fact, for some souls, burial is ideal. Think about it. Some people are deeply attached to form, to the earth, to the slow, organic process of returning to soil. For them, the gradual decomposition of the body mirrors their soul's need to unwind slowly, to release attachments bit by bit, to maintain a gentle connection to the physical plane while they adjust to non-physical existence. Burial offers that. The body cools. It rests in darkness. Microbes and minerals reclaim it over months and years. The etheric body dissolves at its own natural pace. There's no rush, no shock, just time, earth, and quiet transformation. Cayce affirmed this. He said some souls actually choose burial in their pre-birth planning because they know they'll need that slower, softer release. So this isn't a binary. This isn't cremation versus burial, good versus bad, enlightened versus ignorant. This is about consciousness, about understanding what each method does energetically, spiritually, and choosing based on the soul's actual needs. Not convenience, not cost, not what's trendy or what the culture defaults to. In Tibet, they practice sky burial. The body is placed on a mountaintop and offered to vultures. It sounds shocking to Western ears, but it's profoundly respectful. A way of saying, this body has served its purpose. Now let it serve life in another form. In Varanasi, India, bodies are burned on open pyres beside the Ganges River. Families watch, pray, believe. The soul is liberated by the combination of fire and sacred water. In green burial movements across the world, bodies are wrapped in cloth and placed directly in the earth with no casket, no embalming, so they can nourish the soil and become trees. All of these methods work. All of them are sacred when approached with reverence. The message here is not, you must cremate after 3 days or else. The message is, understand the process, understand what you're choosing, and choose consciously based on spiritual wisdom rather than autopilot habit. If you feel drawn to burial, honor that. If you feel drawn to fire, honor that, but honor it with timing and intention. If you feel drawn to something unconventional, research it, understand it, and trust your intuition. There is no dogma here, only clarity, only empowerment, only the invitation to make death a sacred, conscious, self-authored act instead of something that happens to you by default. Cayce's greatest gift wasn't telling people what to do, it was giving them the information they needed to choose wisely. And now you have that information. Death is a threshold, and thresholds attract attention, not all of it benevolent. Cayce spoke plainly about this. He called them lower astral influences, entities, thought forms, or confused souls drawn to the energy of death, drawn to fear, to grief, to unfinished emotional business. This isn't fear-mongering, it's spiritual hygiene. Just as you'd lock your doors at night in a rough neighborhood, you protect the dying and newly dead with prayer, light, and clear intention. Why? Because the soul in transition is vulnerable. It's navigating unfamiliar territory. If it's confused, scared, or clinging to earthly attachments, it can attract energies that feed on that confusion, that prolong it, that keep the soul from moving toward the light. Cayce gave practical protection methods. Here's what works. First, create sacred space. If someone is dying at home, or if the body is resting before cremation, you can visualize light surrounding the room. White light, golden light, whatever resonates. Hold the intention. This space is protected. Only beings of love and truth may enter. All others are turned away. Second, speak words of release. Even if the person seems unconscious, speak to them directly. You are free. It's okay to go. Go toward the light. Your loved ones who've passed are waiting. You are safe. Simple words, but powerful. They give the soul permission to leave without guilt. Third, call upon guides and angels. You don't need to be religious. You don't need formal training. Just ask, mentally or aloud. I ask that this soul be surrounded by guides of the highest light. I ask that angels assist this transition. I ask for protection and clarity. Cayce said these requests are always heard, always answered. Fourth, avoid prolonged grief at the bedside. This is delicate but important. Crying, expressing love, saying goodbye, all healthy, but clinging, begging the person not to go, drowning in despair, that creates energetic cords that make it harder for the soul to release. Grieve fully, but also set the soul free. During cremation, if you're present or thinking of the person, visualize light flowing into the flames. Imagine the fire as sacred, as purifying, as a doorway, not destruction. Hold the mental image of the soul rising upward, clear and luminous, while the body transforms below. This isn't superstition. This is how consciousness works. Your thoughts, your prayers, your focused intention, they create energy. They shape reality, especially at the subtle levels where souls operate. One more thing Cayce emphasized: forgiveness. If there's unfinished business, unspoken resentment, or guilt between you and the dying person, address it. Speak it aloud if possible, or silently, in prayer. I forgive you. I ask your forgiveness. We are both free now. Forgiveness cuts cords. It clears pathways. It allows both souls, the one dying and the one staying, to move forward without energetic baggage. You have more power in these moments than you realize. Death is not something that just happens. It's something you can participate in, consciously, as a sacred act of love. And when you do, you become a guardian, not just of the person dying, but of the threshold itself. Here's a truth Cayce returned to again and again. The way you live shapes the way you die. A body cared for, fed clean food, moved gently, unburdened by chronic rage or fear, releases the soul more easily. The etheric body is clearer. The silver cord dissolves smoothly. The transition is peaceful. A body abused, poisoned by processed food, stiffened by sedentary living, saturated with unprocessed trauma, clings harder. The etheric body is dense, knotted, sticky, The soul's departure is difficult, prolonged, sometimes painful on levels that have nothing to do with physical nerves. This isn't punishment, it's physics, spiritual physics. The body is a teacher. It's been teaching you your entire life. And its final lesson is this: how you treat the vessel matters. Cayce gave specific health recommendations that, in retrospect, were preparing people not just for better living, but for better dying. He emphasized spinal alignment. Why? Because the spine houses the central nervous system, which is the bridge between soul and body. Misalignments create energetic blockages. Chiropractic care, osteopathy, massage all help the life force flow freely, which means the soul can exit more freely when the time comes. He recommended castor oil packs over the liver and abdomen. Why? Because the liver processes not just physical toxins, but emotional ones. Stored anger, resentment, fear, they lodge in the body's tissues. Castor oil packs help release that residue, making the etheric body lighter, cleaner. He taught the importance of forgiveness, not as a moral platitude, but as an energetic necessity. Unforgiven wounds create cords, invisible threads of attachment to the people who hurt you or whom you hurt. Those cords tighten around the heart and solar plexus, and at death, they make letting go harder. Forgiveness isn't about condoning harm, it's about cutting cords. It's about saying, I release you from my energy field. I release myself from yours. We are both free. One of Cayce's most poignant readings was for a woman dying of cancer. She asked if there was anything she could still do to prepare for death. He told her, forgive your father. He hurt you deeply as a child, and that pain is still lodged in your bones. Forgive him, not for his sake, but for yours, so that when you leave this body, you leave light. She did. She wrote him a letter of forgiveness, even though he'd been dead for 20 years. And according to her family, her final days were marked by unusual peace. She died gently, smiling, whispering about light and loved ones waiting. The body is your preparation ground. Every choice you make, what you eat, how you move, what emotions you process or suppress, is either tightening the cords or loosening them. Death isn't separate from life. It's the final exhale of everything you've been practicing. And if you want a conscious death, a graceful transition, an easy release into the light, start now. Care for your body, clear your emotional debris, forgive the unforgivable, untangle the cords. Because when the moment comes, you won't be able to cram for the final exam. You'll simply step into the readiness you've been cultivating all along. Does cremation affect your karma? Does it speed reincarnation or slow it? Does it burn away past life debts or lock them in? Cayce's answer, it depends on the soul's readiness. Some souls are done with earth, exhausted by the cycles of birth, suffering, growth, death, rebirth. They've learned what they came to learn. They've balanced their karmic ledger. And for them, cremation is a symbolic severance, a way of saying, I release all attachment to form. I dissolve all ties to the physical plane. I am spirit now, moving toward higher dimensions. For these souls, fire accelerates the transition. It burns away any lingering energetic static, any residual habits clinging to the etheric body. It's clean, final, liberating, but other souls aren't ready. They still have lessons to learn on earth, relationships to heal, talents to develop, karma to balance. For them, burial might serve better, a slower process that allows the soul to stay closer to the earth plane longer, to review more thoroughly, to prepare more consciously for the next incarnation. Neither is superior. Both are tools. The question is, which tool serves this particular soul's evolution? Cayce introduced a concept he called the bardo, borrowed from Tibetan Buddhism but described in his own language as the borderland. It's the in-between space, the realm where souls rest after death, before choosing or being assigned their next life. In the Bardo, you review everything. Not in judgment, there's no angry God with a clipboard, but in perfect understanding. You see the ripple effects of every choice. You feel what others felt. You grasp the lessons you learned and the ones you missed. And then, with guidance from higher beings, you plan your next incarnation. You choose the circumstances, often difficult ones, that will give you the best opportunity to grow, to heal, to balance karma, to evolve. Cremation, when done consciously after the 3-day threshold, can clarify this process. It removes energetic noise. It wipes the slate clean. It helps the soul see more clearly what it needs for its next chapter. But here's the paradox. The method doesn't matter as much as the consciousness behind it. A soul cremated with love, intention, and awareness will have a clear passage. A soul buried carelessly, with no spiritual understanding, may linger confused in the etheric plane for months.